guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military industrial complex.
What's up, everybody? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm super excited for today's episode. Today we got award-winning journalist Mariana van Zeller. She's done tons of great projects and shows, and she's done Oxycontin Express, which is a documentary, a part of the Vanguard documentary series, which was on Current TV. Also, Gateway to Heroin, which was another one, a part of that series, and both really, really good and worth looking for. Oxycontin Express, I know, is online somewhere. I believe it's on YouTube, but you can Google search it. I'm sure you can find it. It's really, really good and really highlights the issue we had with and have with overprescribed America, and especially painkillers and Oxycontins. Also, she was on Nat Geo with a show called Inside Secret America. It was another great show. And most recently, Breaking Borders, which is a show on Sunday nights on the Travel Channel. And the new one premieres this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, April the 12th. It's called Dying for the American Dream, and it's about the U.S.-Mexico border conflict, and that's basically what the show does. She has a friend who's a chef, and they travel all around the world to Northern Ireland, to Palestine, and get people who are in Egypt and many places, and they get people who are on two different sides of the conflict, and they bring them together using food, and hopefully get some dialogue and get them talking, and in many cases, it seems successful, and I think it's definitely a start. And I think with this, you realize the similarities we all have and how we focus so much on the things that make us different, but underneath all that, we all want the same things, and we have a lot of similarities. So it's a great thing what she's doing, and I think she's highlighting a lot of really important conflicts and issues and international issues, which I don't think we get enough attention in the U.S. on, like Egypt after the revolution. Most people in America don't know what's going on, and also the conflict in Palestine. They don't really know what's causing it in both sides of the story, and usually you hear one side of the story, and it's nice to get both sides and get people from Israel and Palestine and see what they're angry about, what their issues are, and what the concerns are. So it's all really, really interesting and really good. So hopefully you guys enjoy the show, and also I'm going to try to get this show out within 24 or 48 hours because I want to try to get it out so the listeners can listen to this and then check out the show on Sunday. So I'm going to do my best, obviously, with a 7-week-old son. It's going to be a little hard, but I'm going to do my best to try to get it out. So hopefully when you do hear this, you still have time to check out the show on Sunday on the Travel Channel. Enjoy the show, and always remember that if you want to support the show, 36 Music is available everywhere you can find downloadable music. And it's a great way to support the podcast and the music project. So thanks again, guys. I truly appreciate everybody who's been listening. I truly appreciate Mariana van Zeller, who took time out of her busy schedule to come on the show. And it's always nice to support another Portuguese person in alternative media who's trying to spark conversations and thought and hit on very important topics. So hopefully we're all a part of this ripple effect that causes some awakening to these important issues and topics. So thanks again, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Hi.
Hey, Mariana, ¿cómo estás?
Muito bem, obrigada.
How are you? Thanks for being with me today.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry it wasn't working, the Skype before.
Oh, it's okay, no problem. I know all about technical difficulties, so.
Good. Okay.
But thanks for being with me. I'm a huge fan, and I'm remember seeing your documentary, The Oxycontin Express, and I didn't even know you were Portuguese at the time until you were on the Joe Rogan podcast and you mentioned it. And then, I think it's a Portuguese thing, or I guess when you're from a small country, you just like to support people who are from the same country. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so once I heard that, then I'm like, oh shit, So then I started telling more of my friends because I knew I had some friends that were Portuguese that maybe would be a little harder to watch some documentaries. But if I tell them you're Portuguese, then maybe the chances go up a little bit. So.
Oh, good. I am. I'm a very proud Portuguese. I talk about Portugal wherever I go, but I also recently became an American citizen.
Oh, really?
After living in this country for 9 years, and it was one of the happiest days of my life. So I'm sharing both nationalities right now. I'm very proud of both.
So you got a dual citizenship?
I did, yes. I've been sort of lazy in doing it. I could have done it a while back, but I've been a little lazy because there's so much paperwork involved. But recently I decided it was the time with the 2016 elections coming up. I really wanted to make sure I had the chance to vote. So I did it, and it was amazing. It was 4,270 people who got nationalized that day and who got their citizenship that day. And I was standing next to an Indian lady on my left side and a Guatemalan on my right. And they started playing at one point towards the end of the ceremony. They started playing the Proud to be an American song. And at the beginning, with a little video of waterfalls, and at the beginning I was a little thinking, this is so cheesy. And then by the end of the song, I was a mess. I was crying. We were hugging each other, the Indian lady, the Guatemalan lady. And it was an amazing moment, and it really shows what this country is about.
Yeah. I think I definitely have to. I'm on the same boat. I haven't got my citizenship yet either, and I've been in this country since I was 3. And even though I go back every couple years, it's one of those things, kind of similar philosophy. It was one of those things where I'm like, well, it's expensive at the moment. It's a lot of paperwork, and it's just like, do I have $1,200 or whatever it is at the moment? $1,000 just to spend.
Expensive.
Yeah, and it's expensive, and it's like, well, what's the pros and cons? So I'm out $1,000 at the moment. It doesn't really help me much. And when I was younger, and I really got into like politics, and I was kind of I don't know. I was kind of different than a lot of my friends. I got kind of interested in it at a young age, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to become a citizen, and then I can vote. And then by the time I got old enough where I could vote and become a citizen, I realized that voting didn't matter much, and my opinion on politics kind of changed a bit. And I'm just kind of like, really? I'm not sure there's anybody even worth voting for. I'm like, we just continuously get a different version of a slight different version of the last president, and it got to a point where like now I'm just not motivated at all. I remember the last presidency, I'm like, well, if Ron Paul actually gets on the ballot, I'm like, I might become a citizen just so I can vote for him, because he's so different than everybody else. And I don't agree with him with everything, but at least he's different than what we've been getting. And I just like the fact that he at least was honest, and it seemed like he wasn't just telling us what we wanted to hear, but he really believed in those philosophies and opinions, and it was just different. So, and he wasn't taking money from the big corporation. So, I mean, I'm kind of on the same boat. I kind of waited. I am waiting a long time, and I actually just had a child in February the 19th. I had my first child.
Congratulations!
Yeah, thank you. And so, it's one of those things where now he's an American citizen, and I'm just like, I guess it's a matter of time before I just give in and become one. So. But that was my thinking as well. I have a 4-year-old child. My husband is American, and at one point it just made sense. Although I really want to make him I want him to have Portuguese nationality as well, and he doesn't yet. Also because I'm lazy again, and there's so much involved, and again, it's an expensive process. But I hear you on the voting, and we all know that things don't change as fast as we want them to, and don't change at all sometimes. But we're at a time where there's so much at stake that I still like to believe, and perhaps I'm just optimistic. I still like to believe that every single vote counts, and that even if the candidate that we vote for doesn't get elected, at least
there's a way that we can make our voice be heard. And for me, it's still one of the most important things about being a citizen. So I think we had a different opinion on that. But that was really what compelled me to become a citizen. It was that idea that next year I can vote, because I know how difficult it was for me the last 2 elections that I was here, not being able to vote. It was, and I accompanied my husband just because I felt that I needed to do something to feel that I was sort of involved in the process. So I accompanied my husband to the ballot box, and then, he went off and voted, and I just stood there and watched. And I remember leaving the last time and thinking, okay, this is it. Before the 2016 elections, I'm going to be a citizen so I can vote as well.
Yeah, but okay. So I completely agree that it should be one of the most important things as a citizen, and one of the most, one of those things we really should be very lucky to be able to have, just the ability to vote and have that opportunity, and not live under a dictatorship, which even was surprising me growing up and hearing about like my parents growing up during Salazar and in Portugal, and I'm just like, wait, not that long ago we had a dictator in Portugal. It was crazy to learn history from other countries, and to think that even just a generation away from me, my parents and my grandparents grew up with a dictator. It seems like, I guess growing up in America and then learning mostly American history, and I didn't really get into European and other countries' history until after I got out of school and got intrigued with it. But learning American history, it just seemed like a idea of a dictatorship was either in countries that were undeveloped or a long time ago. It was just
absolutely,
so it's insane that, so it definitely, when you look at that and people who lived in countries and under a dictatorship and they didn't have the choice to vote or the option to vote, and now, we have that option, that's awesome. But I do think that, I'm sure like yourself, I was kind of tricked into believing that Obama was going to be different. And I don't know if it was like I was kind of blinded by my dislike of Bush, because Bush and Cheney were so easy to dislike, and they did so many fucked up things that I was just like, maybe that my passion for wanting something different, and I was so angry with them that kind of blinded me to think that Obama seemed different. But, you're a journalist, better than I do about the drone attacks, about in Yemen, about prosecuting whistleblowers, about, all these foreign policy things that don't seem much different than the last president, the NSA surveillance and all these things that haven't really changed. And, a lot of people who did vote for Obama and thought Gitmo was going to be shut down and all these issues that, he ran on, and then nothing changed. Like, don't you feel like that was kind of don't you think that people are changing their perspective? Like, okay, we really thought that our vote made a difference. Now we voted somebody who seemed completely different than the last president, and things haven't changed. Like, how has that affected your opinion on voting?
Not so much. Look, I see your point, and I hear people, and there's a lot of disappointment towards Obama. Especially, I did stories about the youth involvement during the first Obama campaign. So I know how much passion there was there and how much hope. I mean, the word was hope, right? That's what everybody was talking about when they talked about Obama. But I still do. I'm an optimist, and I like to look at the bright side of things as much as I can. And I do think he perhaps didn't do as much as we wanted him to, but I do think that he did affect a lot of people, whether it was with a healthcare bill, whether, there are good things that he tried to do. It's a tough one. As a journalist myself, I don't really like to talk much about politics or give my opinion. But I do like to look at both sides, whether we're talking about Republicans or Democrats. I always try to balance it out and try to see what have they done that's good, what have they done that's bad. And there isn't just bad. There's always things that they do that are benefiting people. And I think Obama falls in that. I do think that he's benefited a lot of people. I do still think that there are a lot of people that still like him and appreciate what he's done. But I do agree with you. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are very, very disappointed and just wished he would have done much more. But that doesn't stop me for being involved in the next elections and making sure that we get somebody there who will do more than Obama.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I think the political thing of like the left and right thing, that's why I loved your work, because it's not about politics. It's about just issues, and it's not about, ideologies or are you Republican or Democrat, and it's just real issues, and it's real people who are dealing with real conflicts in their lives and all that. So it just I sometimes that's why
absolutely what's interesting, Ricky, is that that when I report, there are some issues that I report about that I know I'm going to get flack for. I know that I'm going to get a lot of emails and tweets and whatnot from people who and usually it's people who haven't even seen the actual documentaries or the stories that I've done. If it's any stories about gun issues, gun rights, any stories I do about abortion, usually I already know. If it has that name, if it has those words, those people are going to email me. And usually, I kid you not, it is people who haven't even seen the documentary and immediately assume that I'm against gun rights, that I'm pro-abortion because I represent the media, so therefore I have to be liberal, and they don't even watch it. And the biggest compliments that I get usually is from people who perhaps have a different opinion than I do, but who do take the time to watch the documentary or my work, and then email me and say, hey, I don't agree with everything you said, but I saw that you try to be balanced. I saw that you try to listen to both sides, and I really think you were fair and balanced. And that's how I go into every story that I report about. It's, as much as I have my own opinions, I really try to put them aside and go in there and try to listen to both sides and really find that it's much. I think the world around us is much grayer than we like to believe it is. It'd be easier if it was just black and white and we could see exactly what was right and what was wrong, and we all agreed on that. But unfortunately, it's not, and there's a lot of gray areas. So I think journalism is about exploring those gray areas and trying to sort of show all sides.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think that's really important. And I think that's what I love about your documentaries, and that's what I love about documentary. I know, like, I've gotten in a debate with friends before, and people know that I'm a huge documentary guy. I've had a lot of filmmakers on the show, and a lot of my information does come from documentaries, and it's because I don't know if it's because we live in 2015 and it's just easier for us with our low attention span to watch something and stay entertained than try to read something or find time to read something or whatnot. But I love getting information from documentaries, and I do, obviously, with some documentaries do have agendas, and but even in those agendas, sometimes you can get a lot of good information. There might be an anti-GMO documentary that, they might only show you one side of that story, but there might be a lot of truth to that one side of the story they're showing you.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, the thing about documentary, and that's what I love about your documentary, is that really your opinions don't shine much on these on your work. It's really just showing that you're giving the information and you're letting people just provoke thought and provoke conversation with that information.
I'm a strong believer that viewers are smart enough that they can make their own minds. I don't need to be feeding them my own viewpoints, opinions. And they are. They really are. Usually you really don't have to hit people in the head. You show both sides, and eventually you will get to that conclusion. You will understand. You just have to show a clear picture. And I also think that documentaries are becoming so more and more entertaining also, and better and better. I agree with you. I remember when I first moved to the US, I didn't have much access to documentaries. They just weren't popular in Portugal at all. And then when I moved to the US, it wasn't at all something that I even thought I wanted to do eventually. And then the first time I moved to the US was in 2001. I went to Columbia University for journalism to do a master's in journalism. And within a month at the program in New York City, 9/11 happened. And I was the only Portuguese journalist in Manhattan at the time. And I had a connection with the biggest television station in Portugal.
Right?
Because, SIC, exactly. And I'd work there. I'd work for a travel program, and I traveled quite a bit. But I realized very soon that that's not at all what I wanted to do. Although I was going to these beautiful resorts and beaches, there was much more that I wanted to be reporting about, not just the resorts and the beaches. And so going to Colombia, and then 9/11 happening, SIC contacted me and asked me if I could be the first person sort of to report from the ground. And I went live, and it was a crazy experience because I went live. I was the face that a lot of Portuguese, all my family saw at 9 p.m. newscast, which is the largest newscast in Portugal. It was, my face. I was 24 years old, reporting, super young, no experience, had never done any live coverage whatsoever.
Wow.
It was insane. It was crazy. And I remember I finished, my mom called, she was freaking out, telling me to go home immediately because she was so scared that more attacks could be coming. And I was in sort of an exhilarating mood because I'd just done I'd just done my first live. It had gone really well. I was really excited. And then I walked down the building. This was in the CBS building, the rooftop where all the journalists had met, the foreign journalists, to do live feeds. And then I went down on the streets, and it was when I first started seeing the signs of people who were missing, families holding photographs of family members who were missing. And that's when it hit me. Holy shit, this actually really happened. There was an attack, and we still don't know who's responsible for it. And I remember it was exactly at that moment that I decided I don't want to do breaking news, and I will never want to do this. What I want to do is really in-depth reporting, documentaries, go out there, and instead of reporting what just happened, reporting on why this has happened, and try to understand what can happen next instead. And that was it. That was the day that changed my idea of what journalism for me was going to be about.
Yeah, that's kind of similar to Abby Martin's had that show Breaking the Set, and she left that show for that similar reason. She wanted to do more journalism. She wanted to travel to countries and do stuff like that. And I think that you also, it's a lot, I guess, you probably have a way better understanding of situations and conflicts when you're actually there talking to the people, seeing the people, getting both sides of the story, than just being here and just basically reporting on stories that other people are telling, so...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just such misunderstanding about some of these places. First from imagining that you mentioned the Middle East, and people just are so afraid of it, and they're so afraid of going there. And I've lived in the Middle East. I lived in Syria before the war. I've traveled all around. It's a beautiful part of the world with incredible people. I mean, it's one of my favorite regions in the whole world, and I go there with every opportunity that I have. And I would be happy to. My husband has traveled there a bunch with me. We've been talking. We definitely want to take our son there. And as long as you avoid, of course, we wouldn't go to Syria because there's a full-out war going on there right now. But there's just the neighboring countries of Jordan and Lebanon. They're beautiful countries, and whenever we mention them here, even to some of our friends, there's this face of fear almost. How is it? How can you go there? It's so dangerous, and really it isn't. And there are millions of people who actually live there every day. And as long as you avoid sort of the hot spots, there's so many beautiful places out there to discover. It's just about going out there and doing it. It's something that I always get from aspiring journalists. Always they email me and ask me for advice. And one of the first advice that I always have to give is, first of all, just go out and do it. To go out there, go and find somewhere where you have some sort of connection. In my case, which I had no connection at the time, but it was because the war in Iraq was happening next to learn Arabic and be close to the action. But then right after that, I decided I wanted to go to Brazil because they spoke Portuguese. And then people always, and that's why I had an advantage there. But people always tell me, I don't have money. How am I going to fund this? Look, when I went to Syria and I sold carpets, and that's what I did to be able to fund some of the stories I was doing there and learning Arabic. So what I would do is that I'd buy these carpets, I'd ship them to my mom in Portugal. She would have these sort of little gatherings with people and sell the carpets for me and then send me back the money. And that's how I survived for the 8 months that I lived there.
Wow.
So there's always, you just have to, get out there and do it. It's the best advice I can always give people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, you'll be way happier chasing your dreams. And even if you are doing a job like selling carpets to continue chasing your dreams, you'll be way happier doing that than, just settling down in the town you grew up in and having a career. And it's the same thing. I do this podcast. It's an awful investment. I make no money doing this. I do it completely just because of the same reason I'm sure that motivates you to do documentaries, and that's trying to provoke thought and get information out there and expose interesting people and interesting work to my listeners, and hope that people start looking at these issues that they might not either not know about or just might not have looked at from all angles. And I think that's important. I saw you on a Huffington Post live interview, and I remember they were taking like viewer questions, and one of the questions was, well, here's, you're doing your documentaries and you're doing your shows, but what do you think the end game is, or what do you think the outcome's going to be? How can you help? How can you actually do something? And I forgot what your answer was, but I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I think making those documentaries and just putting that information out there is doing something. And that's why this podcast is called the Ripple Effect Podcast, because I truly believe in everybody who, like yourself, who does documentaries and sparks these conversations and highlights these conflicts and highlights these issues, and just putting that out there. I think it's kind of an underestimated way of making a change, because that's how you create change, is sparking these conversations and getting people to talk. And I know Oxycontin Express was one of those documentaries. If people haven't seen it, it's online. It was a Vanguard documentary. At that time, it was on Current TV, and it's an amazing documentary that really exposed people to how serious this pharmaceutical, the Oxycontin issue is. And really, you did another documentary after called Gateway to Heroin, which took place in Massachusetts. And I was born in Portugal, but I live in Massachusetts. I grew up in Massachusetts, in Western Mass. And I know how serious that heroin issue is. I know a lot of people who were addicted to pills, and then when people put the lid on writing prescriptions so easily, all of a sudden, what do they move on to? Well, what's the next best thing? Heroin. And then there's, I know so many people who either have friends, almost nobody I know doesn't know somebody who's died of heroin overdose or been a heroin addict or pill addict. It's so common, it's ridiculous. So
absolutely. The main character from our Oxycontin Express piece died shortly after the documentary came out. Another person I just heard last week, it broke my heart, for the Gateway to Heroin documentary. We spent some time at the home of, I believe the dad was a doctor and his wife, and they had one son. And he had gotten together this son who was at the time off heroin, although he had a heroin problem that started with Oxycontin as well. He got all his friends who had trouble with heroin around at his house for us to come in and film and interview them. We interviewed, I think it was about 6 or 7 of them. And the kid, the one whose house it was, just passed away just 2 weeks again as well. And a bunch of his friends that we met that night apparently have also passed away. And it's such a tragedy. And I agree with you. I mean, we journalists get a lot of flack for, you guys report on this, but you always show the bad side and you don't really show the solutions. But it's about exposing the truth and raising awareness, right? If you can do that right, if you can let people know what's happening around and let people, discover a little bit more of the world around us, then I think we've done our job really well.
Well, how are you going to come up with solutions if a lot of people don't even know the problems? So the thing is, the fact that you guys are highlighting the problems in the first place, that sparks the conversations, which eventually hopefully gets to the solution. So, I mean, I remember hearing you on the Joe Rogan podcast and hearing him talk about how he didn't know how serious the issue was with Oxycontins, and just, how Florida alone wrote more prescriptions than, or 10 times more prescriptions than the rest of the U.S.
Yes.
And so it's just one of those things where, like, I think that alone, it's sparking the conversation. It's letting people realize how serious these issues are. Then from there, we can work on the solutions. But a lot of times, if these issues aren't talked about, or people aren't being a journalist, and really, there's not a whole lot of documentaries on TV anymore. You have Frontline. You have, you've always done great shows with Inside Secret America and Nat Geo, which was on, and then now obviously Breaking Borders, which is on the Travel Channel Sunday nights at 9. And it's just, you're doing great work, but it's limited on what you can get on TV. That's why I think the internet is really where a lot of people are getting their news and stuff like that. How has that impacted your work? Because obviously your last 2 shows have been on TV, and have you seen that there's a struggle for people to want these shows, and channels to want these shows, and viewers to want these shows on TV and cable, or is there still room for that on cable, even though a lot of people are watching stuff like Vice and stuff online?
Yeah, what I think is interesting is that if you get a bunch of if you get on the editorial meetings with the people that actually run some of the cable channels and even network news, if you get in some of the editorial meetings at network news, for a long time there was this belief that young people weren't interested in foreign news and in hard news, in news about the world, around the world. And I think, what Vanguard did a little bit back when when it was on. It's not on air anymore because Current TV isn't on air anymore. But when Current TV existed, when Vanguard was around, and then what Vice has done so incredibly well, it has shown all those people that for years shunned these stories because they believed that there was no appetite for them. It just showed that there is an enormous appetite for them, that young people are in fact interested in what's happening around them. And so I've had the incredible opportunity in this past year of working on this show, like you just mentioned, Breaking Borders. And for me, I remember when I got the call that they were trying to put together this show. The concept is it's me and a famous American chef, Michael Voltaggio, traveling around the world to these conflict zones. And while I meet these guests and find out about the conflicts, Michael sort of discovers the local cuisine, and then at the end we put all sides, the guests that we've met from all sides of the conflict together at the table to talk about sort of the conflict, their stories, their lives, and all that. And when I first got the email about this, and so that they wanted to try me out and see if I could be a good fit for them, it was one of those, holy moly, this is such a simple concept, so easy, so simple, and yet it can have such a great effect. It can be, what I always say about this show, is that it's a little bit, we're feeding people broccoli, but it's covered in cheese. And broccoli because we're giving them information that is useful. We're having, people are learning about the world. They're learning about conflicts around the world. They're meeting and all these inspiring people around the world. And yet we're making it entertaining. And I think that's the biggest challenge for us as journalists is, it's not too hard to go out there and do a very dry piece. You talk to both sides, you hear it. The challenge is to make it entertaining and make people want to watch, right? Vice has done that very well. I like to believe that Vanguard did that well too. And that is what we always strive for. And I think this show, Breaking Borders, sort of accomplishes that because we also show people these beautiful places to travel. We're showing people the local cuisine. There's some light moments, but at the same time, we're also giving them really important, good information. People are being educated at the same time as they're having fun watching. That's always my challenge. It's making sure, yes, make things that are important, but yes, make them interesting and make them in a way that people actually want to watch.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of bringing people together around food is a great idea because anybody who knows foreigners, I don't care what country you're from, if it's Syria, if it's Portugal, if it's Estonia, I have friends from all over the world, and the one thing we all have in common is we all love to eat, and we all love to be together and have that sense of, like those big family dinner type things,
right,
where everybody's eating and communicating and talking, and so that, like, when I first started watching Breaking Borders, and I saw this idea of bringing people together who might have, difference in opinion, but yet they can all come together around a great meal, which there's a lot of pressure on making the dinner for so many different types of people and so many different types of countries and different. I mean, it's amazing the food that is created and that and for again, like for so many, and try to get the organic type of food that they like and they enjoy and so it's amazing and like I said, it was a great idea because I think that is something that brings us all together. And I think that the other thing with traveling all over the world, and I've seen a lot of different documentaries from people all over the world, like your shows and others. And the one thing you see and you notice is that there's not much difference between all these different types of people. We all love to
Absolutely.
eat. We all love to eat. We all care about our friends and family. We all care about the future of our kids. There's a lot of similarities. And I think that a lot of times we focus so much on what makes us different that we kind of forget what makes us similar. And is that something you have seen?
Oh, absolutely. I say that all the time. I've traveled all around the world for the past 15 years. I've been doing nothing but traveling around the world. And I will tell you that is always something that strikes me as different. As much as I travel because I like difference and I like to explore and go to places that are completely different from where I am and where I live, that's for me, it's the thrill of traveling. At the same time, the more I arrive to the conclusion the more I realize how much we have in common, and that's what it is. You know, you being a Portuguese yourself too. You know what the importance of a big, large table where, you know, some of the most important decisions I've made in my life have been around a table with my family. You know, the fact that I came to study to the United States. You know, what I wanted to become when I was a grown up. It's where I told my parents that I was engaged and going to get married. I mean, all those important moments in my life have happened around the dinner table. There's just something about the intimacy of a dinner table and about sharing a meal. You know, breaking bread, that just allows for people to share, to open up, and to realize that, again, there's much more that unites us than there is that separates us. And that's what's been so interesting in all these conflicts. I mean, we've been to places where people hate each other, where people, you know, have tried to kill each other's side, and by the end of and there's this always intense moment at the dinner table when the guests first arrive. It's the first time in many cases that they're meeting each other. But there's an immediate dislike because, you know, they represent different sides. And I'm the one sitting at the table with them while Michael Voltaggio is cooking in the kitchen. And I'm waiting there and I'm trying to make conversation. And it's always awkward. I'm trying anything to make them feel a little bit more comfortable. And it's always awkward. And then Michael comes with these incredible dishes that he sets, these beautiful presentations that he's put his heart and soul in. And people start tasting, and it's Michael's interpretation of the local cuisine, because it's very important for Michael, which I think is fantastic for him, that he always tries to really sort of respect people and show, you know, and give them a meal that they can sort of relate to, but his interpretation of it. And people start tasting the food and they immediately sort of connect with the local ingredients, and they realize that this is something that they've been eating all their lives, but with a little different twist. And the conversation starts with them talking about the food with each other. And then from then onwards, it's just, the conversation just flows immediately. Then they start talking, and then, you know, there's shouts sometimes, there's a lot of anger at some points, there's a lot of frustration, but without an exception, perhaps one, I think we shot 13 episodes, there is perhaps one or two cases where this didn't happen, but the majority of times, at the end of the meal, the guests will stand up and they will head to each other and they will either hug or handshake, and they all say how much they appreciated the opportunity, how much they've learned from hearing the other side, and in many cases they exchange emails and telephone numbers. I mean, it blows my mind every single time how such a simple thing as having people sitting around the table talking can actually change. It might not change the large event, you know, we're not ending conflict, but we're changing, even if it's the 3-4 guests that we have sitting at the dinner table, and hopefully the people that are watching. I mean, what an incredible opportunity that is.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. I mean, just the idea of these people who, you know, at least thought they disliked each other, and then you put them together, like you said, you start talking about food, you start talking about things that aren't really conflicting interests or conflicting ideologies, and then, you know, after it's all said and done, they might sit across from each other and realize that we're not that much different, you know, and I think that's the big thing that you can take away from all these stories and these conflicts, is that I think that we focus so much on the things that make us different and the conflict itself that we don't realize that most people just want the same things. They want schools for their kids. They want just a safe environment, and really that's all we want. And I wonder how much of like media and all this stuff that focuses so much on just the things that make us different and the conflicts, that we forget all that other stuff. Plus the news in America is kind of I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's kind of run by corporate America, and really you don't get much, at least good international news in the U.S. I mean, you really, I mean, my parents watching RTP get better sometimes international news than I do watching, you know, CNN, you know, so it's, do you think that's a huge issue with what makes us feel like we're so separated, is because of the fact that maybe our media sucks and maybe we don't get it? Because you've traveled all over the world. What do you see in differences from media, or how they, I guess, journalists or reporters report on certain stories? Do you see more reporting down the middle in other countries, or at least more reporting internationally in general?
I think we have both. I think, look, we have some of the best journalists in the world are here. Some of the best journalism in the world is done in the U.S. You know, obviously, I would like to see a lot more of it. And, you know, again, in the past few years, in the past actually decades, there's been there's been a move again. Like, they've been putting their backs towards all these international news and focusing more on domestic news, which is important, obviously, but you can't shun, especially in an age where everything is interconnected, as we've been seeing so well recently. You just can't shun international news. And so I do think that there's been sort of a getting away from it, but I do think that we still have some of the best journalism in the world is done here. And you compared it to Portugal, and I can say myself, I think yes, they have a lot more coverage of international news. I think it's partly because we're a smaller country, but that is actually good because it makes us more curious. I can see it in myself. I'm just so curious about the rest of the world, having grown and raised in a small country with only 10 million beautiful people. It just gave me, I knew from a very early age that I wanted to go out there and explore. And actually, if you look back in history of Portugal, that is what made Portugal such an amazing, powerful empire back during the discovery period, because it was the fact that we all came, we felt like as a population we were trapped in this small country, that there was a need to go out and explore. We have, the only neighbor we have is Spain on one side, and then we have the wide Atlantic Ocean on the other. So they felt compelled to go out onto the sea and explore. And I felt that from a very early age. I felt like Portugal was small, and I wanted to know more about the world. And I do feel like that a lot of my Portuguese friends and family, perhaps know a little bit more about the world, but we don't. Again, you see, I always try to look at the bright side of things. We can't forget that the U.S. is such a big country in itself that you can spend years in school just learning about all the different states and the rich history of the U.S. So I mean, it's like everything. It's pros and cons and good and bad, but I do think that some of the best journalism in the world is done in the United States. I just hope there was much more of it. And it's a sad fact that we have, you can count by the fingers of one hand how many shows are out there on television that actually report on, that go out there with journalists that actually go out there and report and aren't just sitting in a studio talking and regurgitating the news of the day again and again and again. It's very few the shows where people actually go out there on the ground and do original reporting. And I wish there was much more of that.
Well, I wonder how much of it is also people just afraid of doing reporting, because you look at how many times people have, reporters have gotten in trouble for exposing something, and then next thing you know, they're being prosecuted, with the Espionage Act or something. It's insane. And I wonder if it's just easier to work at CNN. You do the Republican Democrat debate stuff. You do, this way you never step on anybody's toes. So this way you continue to get access to these politicians. They can continue to come on your shows because they know they're not going to get the hardball questions. And it's just easier to kind of go. And really it's ratings too, because you look at, I've used this example numerous of times on this podcast about CNN and like the airplanes. I mean, every time there's an airplane on the news, they'll do a whole month of
it's a party at CNN.
Yeah, I mean, it's breaking news for a month, and never once do they have any new information, and it's just like it's all for ratings. And so it just, I wonder how much of that has to do with it. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think, to go back to the dinner table thing, yeah, I mean, I think that there is something about, a lot of foreigners come to America, they come here to get a better life, and usually that means financially and to make more money and try to have a better life for their children. But I think we do lose a little bit of, we get so, I guess we focus on the idea of making more financially money that we forget what really made us happy. And my parents are from up north. I was born, up north near Chaves, and it's farmers and people were happier then than they seem to be now. And America has more material stuff than any other country. We have some of the fattest poor people in the world. It's like we have all these things, but yet how unhappy we are is crazy. It's crazy how we, it's almost like that simpler life where we had community, and I gave my tomatoes to my neighbors gave me their cucumbers or eggs or whatever, and we had a sense of community. And it seems like today we're like more connected because we have the internet, and I can show baby pictures to my family in Portugal and France and all over the world, but yet I might not even know my neighbors. I might not know the people who live right next door. I might not even have a dinner table that's used for friends and family to sit around and eat and talk. So it's it is weird how it seems like that thing of having that dinner table. And even growing up, my parents, I could get an F on my report card. They'd be upset. But if I missed dinner, it was the end of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
And I didn't understand it growing up. I'm like, why is this dinner thing such a big deal? Can't I just eat when I get home? And then I realized, like, if we didn't sit together and have dinner together, then we're just roommates. We just live in the same house, but we don't talk. We don't have conversations. My parents won't know what's going on in my life. And so I think it is a very important aspect. It seems like something very minimal and not that important. But as you get older, you look back and you're like, really, that was important. That's how my parents knew when I was, sometimes you see, parents that have kids that are depressed or get in drugs and stuff like that. And a lot of times it's really successful parents. And sometimes I wonder, is it because they're so focused on career? They're so focused on trying to be a good parent by giving them a big house, and they're not focused on just giving the kid attention? Because one thing we learn from kids is that they don't remember how expensive that toy was that you bought them for Christmas, but they remember where you went on Christmas or where the time you went to the park and stuff. And I think that
it's the experiences. It's not the material things, right? It's always the experiences. I couldn't agree with you more on that. I couldn't agree. I think we're losing that a little bit. And that's what, we say about this show that I appreciate, and I hope it does, is that it does start. It shows the importance of dinner tables. It shows the importance of talking around a dinner table. I mean, this is the time that we get to, it's the update moment, right? You spent all day, you're busy, people are doing different things. The kid is in school. I mean, even I have a 4-year-old son, and it's incredibly important to me. He eats dinner, and we're, because I'm Portuguese, I guess, we eat dinner a little later. We eat dinner around 8 p.m., and he eats dinner with us. And, I know that a lot of in the U.S., especially his friends, a lot of them eat dinner earlier, and then their parents eat dinner later. For us, it's very important, for me especially, to have my son sit at the dinner table. And, he complains, he doesn't like it, but it's the moment where we all sit down together, we can all talk. I'll ask him questions about school. Most of the time he doesn't answer anything anyway, but it doesn't matter. It's the ritual. It's starting early on that ritual. I mean, especially for me, because I travel so much, and, I'm a working mom, and, a lot of times I'm not with him, that when I am here in LA, I want to make sure that that we have those moments, that I have the moments where we can all just sit down and talk and learn about each other and what we're doing. Because even if you live in the same house, again, it's like being roommates, like you said. If you don't actually have that moment where you sit down and talk, then there's so much that you're losing, that you're missing out. So I absolutely agree with you. It's incredibly important. But just to go back to the issue of immigration, you were talking about people coming here to the U.S. for financial reasons. When I'm asked, like, what is the subjects that I most or the stories that I've done that I most like, usually I always say it's immigration. It's a really important subject for me. It's one of those. It was one of the first stories I did for Current TV back when I first started working as a journalist here in the U.S. And it's still one of the subjects that I'm most passionate about. And I think it's because it's about something that is so human. The reason why people immigrate, and I think a lot of this gets lost on a lot of people that are against immigration, or that are against illegal immigration, and it's lost on a lot of people that the reason why millions of people are immigrating to the United States, the reason why we have millions of undocumented immigrants in the United States is because of something that we all share, which is the pursuit of happiness, right? We all want to go to a place. You see, a lot of the people that we speak to when we do these stories, they come from very poor backgrounds, places where there's nothing else that they can do. They start having kids, and they want to make sure they see their neighbors going to the United States just for a few months, a few years, and being able to come back and building a home for their kids and providing for good schooling, good education. And obviously, I mean, if I was living in a situation like this, I would probably, quite frankly, do the same thing. I would want that. I would want to provide better for my family. And, I always say that it's those bravest souls that actually take that incredibly dangerous journey to come across, to do something that we all share, which is, again, the pursuit for a better life. So it's a subject that I keep going back to, and I can't get enough. And actually, in Breaking Borders, we had the incredible opportunity of having a discussion about immigration. We went to the Mexico-U.S. border in Arizona and hosted a meal with a member of the Minutemen militia, an American woman who works on the other side at a shelter, who is trying to help out people who are about to do the journey into the United States. So very different viewpoints. And we sat, and a rancher who lives right on the border and who sees his ranch, being, the stream of immigrants coming across his ranch on a weekly basis, and sitting all these people down at the dinner table and having this discussion about a subject that is so close to my heart was, I think, one of the highest points for me in the whole show.
Yeah, I think that Mexico thing is so important because we invest, and I don't know if you agree with me, but I tell people sometimes, I'm like, we invest so much money in tearing down and then rebuilding countries in the Middle East that a lot of times they can't do any harm to us. They're not really issue. They really can't affect us. But yet we have a country that borders our country that is a mess, run by cartels who are ruthless. They kill everything from politicians to policemen and they don't just kill them. They want you to see their bodies.
Bloggers. Absolutely.
And one of the most dangerous country or towns in the world is Juarez, Mexico, which is right on the border. Jennifer Lopez actually has a movie that I can't believe I'm actually telling people to watch a Jennifer Lopez movie, but she had a movie called Border Town that she was in, which is a true story about Juarez, Mexico, and it's amazing. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of women are raped, killed, murdered in that town, and nobody's been locked up. A lot of them aren't even investigated. And people are so afraid. And the thing is, this country borders us. We have incentive to get this country on their feet, because instead of just having more militias or, what some politicians say, have a bigger fence or whatever, how about we just fix the country so people don't keep wanting to come here? Why do people want to come here? Why do they risk their lives and sometimes get shot and killed to come to this country? Because their country's a mess. And instead of fixing something that we have direct incentive into fixing, because one, it would stop people jumping and trying to get to this country. It would minimize that. And two, you would fix a country that could be an ally, and we could, look good in the eyes of the public and the world, because, most of the rest of the world doesn't look at us too well because of us getting involved in conflicts, and we could actually do some good with our power. And plus, our resources wouldn't be stretched all the way to the Middle East. It would be easier to have people go to Mexico and help fix their country and then come back home instead of being, in Iraq or Afghanistan and stuff. So the idea that we just think about, let's just build a bigger fence or have more border police is our option, instead of thinking, let's fix the country. Never mind the fact that 160 years ago, most of the southwest of America was Mexico, and most people don't know much about the American-Mexican War and how, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, Texas, especially countries, states like Arizona, Texas, who really are anti-Mexicans coming to this country. I mean, those states were theirs for a long time, and all the Mexican and Latin influence in those states and that part of the U.S. I mean, obviously, you live in California. There's a lot of
absolutely
Mexican influence, and if you deported all the Mexicans, a lot of California was shut down. So what's your opinions on that? Do you think that we should have more resources invested in Mexico, and maybe that would be something that could fix the immigration issue and maybe other issues?
Absolutely. I think that it's always about looking at the problem at the root cause of the problem, right? And trying to, instead of trying to look at solutions to what the effect of the cause, like go for the cause. Go, what is happening? Why is this happening? And what can we do to prevent this from happening? Instead of building these massive walls that, in fact, aren't doing anything but making it more dangerous for people to cross over. More people, it's just making more people die. It's making the journey more dangerous, but it's actually not stopping people from crossing over as much as people would like to think it is. I mean, millions and millions and millions of dollars, I can't remember the exact figure, but millions of dollars spent on this wall. And we actually had the opportunity for this show to fly over on a little airplane, to fly over and see the border right over Arizona. And it's the whole, it's so the way it's been done, it's just so silly. So you have this massive wall, millions of dollars spent, but the wall doesn't go all the way through. It stops at certain points where the terrain gets dangerous, where the terrain, they believe the terrain is going to prevent people from going. What happens? Instead of people coming across, now there's a wall, they go around. And so what's happening is that it's making more people die. So that's the end result. More people are dying, the same amount, it hasn't prevented many people from coming. People are still coming. And instead of trying to figure out why are people coming and what can we do to stop people from coming, let's try and invest in these countries, try to make people, why are they coming? They're coming because they don't have jobs, because they don't have money. How can we actually address that instead of building these massive walls that do nothing? And we're spending taxpayer money in these massive surveillance systems all around the border, that even the rancher that we spoke to who lives on the border, who has, part of the wall runs through his ranch, and then the other part of his ranch doesn't have a wall. And he was even, he'd like to stop the flow of illegal immigrants into the United States, and yet he was the first one to say that the wall hasn't done anything but just made it more dangerous of a journey for everybody that's trying to come into this country. So it's about going and trying to figure out why this is happening and trying to stop the flow from the beginning of it, and trying, to make people to invest in those countries and make sure that people want to stay in their countries, because at the end, they all do. The money all ends up flowing back into Central America and to Mexico, and in a lot of cases, people just end up going back there anyway. So, they much prefer to live in their country anyway. But let's make sure that we have a system where we're investing in those countries, and that we're also giving the opportunity of people to come here on a temporary basis, perhaps, to work and to go back. But none of that is being done because it's all about showing. It's not so much about actually trying to find solutions. It's a lot, as we all know in politics, it's about showing that, pretending that you're doing something, or showing that you're doing something. So you're building all this money to erect this wall. And in effect, it doesn't have much of an effect at all.
Yeah, and that's such an important point, what you said, that the fact that we always look at the issue, but we disregard the root of the issue. It's like, you have knee pain, you take painkillers for it, but you don't figure out, well, is it because I'm overweight? Is it because of my lack of nutrition? Like, we don't get to the root of the issue. We just like to put a Band-Aid on things and just think that it goes away. And yeah, that's why I love the fact that you're highlighting the Palestine conflicts and all these important issues, so people can really start having a better understanding of what causes these issues, where they start. That's why I had people on, and we talked about. I just had James Corbett on. We talked about the Ottoman Empire and the fall of that, and how I was telling him how a lot of times when you look at conflicts that are going on today and you do your research on the history from all the way back to World War I and Israel becoming a state and all these things, you really start figuring out like what you can understand current events a lot better when you look at historical events. And so it's important to kind of get to not just look at the surface, but get deeper into the issues and figure out what's causing it, why do they have these issues. And the other thing you said that's really important is the fact that a lot of these people are trying to leave this country because of necessity. They have no choice. They have no. I know people from Guatemala, I know people from Mexico who came to this country and they can't go back. They haven't seen their family in years and years and years.
Yeah, and we haven't even spoken about the violence. A lot of these people are actually fleeing violence. A lot of these people saw their families being killed in front of them. So we forget about that. We choose to believe that it's only people who want a better life, but actually it's also people who are fleeing violence in many of these Central American countries. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. It's I know that you're a little tight on time, but I think they said that you had like 45, 50 minutes. So I won't keep you for too much longer. I know you're a busy woman, but the show it premieres this Sunday, April the 12th at 9 p.m. Eastern, and I believe the show is, I think I wrote it down somewhere. It's the show about Mexico, and please.
It's the U.S.-Mexican border episode. It's right on our own backyard. We didn't have to travel very far from it, and yet some of the opinions that we've heard and some of the conversation, even though there's so much talk about immigration in this country, find a lot of new things on this show, a lot of things that you've never heard, and just the opportunity to have both sides sitting at a dinner table, which even for me, who've been reporting on immigration for so long, it was really truly eye-opening.
Yeah, it's called "Dying for the American Dream," and actually, I love that title. That's a great title because it really, it really captures what exactly a lot of these people immigrating to this country is trying to do. They just want a fair shot of the American dream, like the rest of us. And it is funny how it's a country full of immigrants trying to keep immigrants out, but it's it's a really important topic, and I think it's a topic that doesn't get hit on enough, especially when we see 43 students shot by cartels and can't find the bodies, and that just happened recently in Mexico. It's insane what's going on over there, and the fact that it's not getting more attention, and we're not trying to do something about it besides just talk about it every once in a while is insanity to me. So I absolutely love your work. I'm a huge fan, and even if you weren't Portuguese, I'd still love your work.
Thank you, Ricky. Thank you so much.
And I'll keep watching, and hopefully I'll have you on again. I'm sure you're always up to something. So
absolutely, I'd love to. Muito obrigada.
Thank you, Mariana. I'll be looking forward to the show, and keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep.
I'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Believe in the ripple effect.